Most people planning a U.S. road trip are starting at the same list of routes. Route 66, Pacific Coast Highway, Blue Ridge Parkway. And those routes, they're all worth driving, but they're not the whole story. Hey, I'm Teresa from an Acre in the City. This channel is for people who actually want to experience the U.S., not just pin destinations that they'll visit someday. If you're newer to road tripping, or you're tired of chasing itineraries that are built for someone else's life, you're in the right place. Today I'm sharing 5 scenic U.S. road trips that are genuinely worth your time. And they're probably not getting the attention they deserve. So just what makes the trip feel overlooked? You always hear about the famous routes. And those, they're crowded. There can be parking headaches. Sometimes you need reservations. And sometimes there's unspoken pressure to visit every stop that someone else recommended. An overlooked road trip isn't a lesser road trip. In many cases, it's actually a better experience because it still feels like discovery. You can pull over whenever anything catches your eye, and you have time to spend at someplace unexpected. You can change your plans without feeling like you're missing out on a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Usually the most memorable road trips are memorable because you gave yourself extra time to explore, instead of rushing from one famous place to the next. That's exactly why every route on today's list made the cut, not because they're secret, but because they're rewarding. Why are some of the best road trips not really famous? Because popularity shapes what's recommended, and what gets recommended shapes what people expect to love. The result? The same handful of road trips that get talked about over and over again. Some of my favorite road trips aren't attached to famous routes at all. They're attached to unexpected moments, stopping in Paulsville, Washington, and immediately wishing I had more time to spend there, watching the stars appear over Fort Davis, Texas, finding a scenic overlook that wasn't mentioned on an itinerary. The places that stick with me the longest usually aren't the places that get the most attention. They're places that still feel authentic, places that belong to themselves. And every route on this list has that quality. So let's start with number 5. But before we jump into the routes, if you're still trying to figure out how to actually plan a road trip around destinations like these, I have a free guide called 5 Days to Your Perfect Adventure. It's a simple 5-step process for planning trips without the overwhelm. I'll link that below. Let's get into it. Number 5, Door County, Wisconsin. If you're looking for a slower paced road trip, Door County deserves a spot on your list. The peninsula stretches into Lake Michigan, and it feels like a completely different world from the busy cities nearby. There's small harbor towns, waterfront restaurants, cherry orchards, scenic bluffs overlooking the water. The pace is slower here, and that's part of the appeal. One of my favorite things about Door County is that it doesn't demand anything from you. You don't need a packed itinerary. You can spend a day wandering through towns like Fish Creek and Imperium, enjoying the views and letting the day unfold naturally. For me, this route is best in late spring or fall when the weather is beautiful and the crowds are a little bit lighter. And Peninsula State Park alone makes it worth the drive. Okay, and maybe ice cream at Wilson's Restaurant and Ice Cream Parlor in Imperium. Number 4, the Black Hills beyond Mount Rushmore in South Dakota. Most people drive to Mount Rushmore, take a photo, and then leave. I think that's a big mistake because the real magic of the Black Hills is outside of Mount Rushmore. Needles Highway is one of the most surprising drives I've done in the U.S. The road winds through towering granite spires that look completely out of place in South Dakota. The scenery changes around every curve, and there are stretches that you find yourself slowing down simply because you don't want to miss anything. Adding Custer State Park, Sullivan Lake, and Wind Cave National Park, and you'll have an incredible road trip that most visitors barely scratch the surface of. If you enjoy geology, wildlife, and scenic drives, this route is really hard to beat. Number 3. North Shore Scenic Drive, Minnesota. If someone showed you the pictures of the North Shore of Minnesota without telling you where it was, you might not guess Minnesota. Lake Superior feels almost ocean-like. The rocky shoreline, the dramatic cliffs, the forests, the waterfalls. It all comes together in a landscape that feels much bigger than what people expect. One of my favorite stops is Gooseberry Falls. It's easy to access and incredibly scenic, and somehow it still manages to feel special every time you visit. You can also explore places like Split Rock Lighthouse, Grand Marais, and Tateguchi State Park along the way. For anyone who enjoys scenic drives and natural beauty without the massive crowds, this route deserves serious consideration. Number 2, take a West Texas scenic loop with stops in Fort Davis, Marfa, Big Bend, and Alpine. This route might not be for everyone, and that's exactly why it's so special. West Texas asks something of you. Long distances, wide open landscapes, hours between stops. But if you embrace that, the reward is incredible. Fort Davis is one of the biggest surprises in my route. The mountains completely changed my expectations of Texas. And once the sun starts setting, the entire region takes over a completely different personality. One evening in Fort Davis, I watched the sky get darker and darker until more stars appeared than I can recall seeing in many years. It felt like a place that was designed for slowing down. Add the McDonald Observatory, Marfa, and Big Bend National Park, and you'll have a road trip that feels genuinely adventurous. Oh, and don't forget Alpine, a great little town with murals, the Museum of Big Bend, and a desk on top of a mountain. This route is best in spring or fall. The summer heat here is no joke. And number 1, Michigan's Upper Peninsula waterfall route. If somebody asked me for one recommendation, I'd probably tell them, head to the UP. There's so many waterfalls to explore. There are more than 300 named waterfalls in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and many of them are surprisingly easy to visit. And you won't have timed entry here. No complicated permits. No giant crowds. You park, you walk a short distance, and you find yourself standing in front of something beautiful. Tuquamanon Falls, Bond Falls, Munising Falls, Pictured Rocks. These are all incredible stops in the Upper Peninsula. But what surprises me the most isn't necessarily the waterfalls. It's the drive itself, following Lake Superior, passing through forests, stopping in small towns, watching the landscape constantly change. The drive becomes just as memorable as the destinations you stop at. And if you're a Thomas Dambo fan, there's even a giant troll waiting to be discovered for first-time road trippers, families, and anyone looking for a high-reward trip without a lot of stress. This is one of the easiest recommendations that I can make. And if you go in the winter, totally different experience, but so worth it. So many ice caves, especially by Pictured Rocks. If one of these routes stood out to you, don't make the mistake of adding it to some giant bucket list and then forgetting about it. Pick one. Add it to your calendar. Start building a trip around it. Because people who create meaningful travel memories aren't usually the people who spend the most time researching. They're the people that choose something and go. Once you figure out which road trip appeals to you the most, the next question becomes just as important. What kind of landscapes actually fit into the kind of trip that you want to have? Watch this next video, where I break down how to choose between the mountains and the coast for your next trip. Because that decision shapes almost everything that comes after it. Until next time, happy travels.